Okay, now let's get into Jake Paul. I mean, there's so much to say, but this week he was interviewed by the Daily Beast, and the interview was absolutely wild. The article is literally titled, Jake Paul believes COVID is a hoax and 98% of news is fake. Obviously, obviously we know Jake Paul sucks and is the worst, but honestly, I didn't even realize to what extent. He got in trouble with the city of Los Angeles for throwing a huge party over the summer, but the thing is, he's not just, like, unaware, he's truly ignorant.
He's so ignorant. It's insane.
Like, I honestly,
mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling. Like, I don't, because sometimes I'll get, like, Logan Paul and Jake Paul mixed up, so I'm just, like, I don't really know.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I forget, like, all the things that, like, Jake Paul himself has done. And I'm like, it's so bad. I mean, the first half of the interview, the interviewer was just asking Jake Paul about his boxing endeavors. So it was kind of like a positive, like, hey, what are you doing now? Like, tell us about your boxing hobby, like, whatever. But then the interviewer started asking about, like, all the controversies surrounding him, which made me remember all the controversies, which was, like, him getting fired from his Disney show.
Which I forgot he was on.
Which I totally forgot. The disturbances he caused in his neighborhood, his use of the N-word, him filming his friends looting when people were protesting for Black Lives Matter, him being investigated by the FBI, and literally, like, the list goes on and on. And the thing is, Jake Paul wasn't really commenting on anything. Like, he got asked, but then he got asked his feelings on COVID, and literally in the interview, like, shit completely hit the fan. So the interview kept, like, proving his points wrong. Like, Jake Paul would be like, oh, like, it's the same as the flu. Like, the interviewer would say how many people died from COVID this year. And Jake Paul was like, well, it's the same as the flu. And, like, the interviewer was literally like, no, like, a fraction of people have died from the flu that have died from COVID. Like, it's not the same. And Jake Paul was like, well, there's a vaccine. And the interview was like, there's literally not a COVID vaccine. Like,
not
what
yet.
are you talking about? So it's just, like, it started to get, you could tell the interview was, like, I mean, good on the interviewer. He obviously was pushing where he should be pushing. Like, I think oftentimes maybe interviewers might not feel comfortable doing that, but I think it's so important to, like, fact check who you're interviewing. But then Jake Paul started kind of claiming that the interviewer was asking leading questions and that the interviewer was arrogant, that news was all fake. Like, he literally said 98% of news is fake, and so on and so forth. And honestly, my favorite quote of the whole thing, Jake Paul started saying the interviewer has so much influence as someone working in media and that he should open his mind. So the interviewer replied and said, well, you influence a lot of what people say and breathe and do too, probably more than I do. To which Jake Paul replied, quote, no, definitely more than you do. I've never even heard of you. And I'm like, what? It was I was like, this is such an asshole. Like, I was like, this sucks. Like, this is literally, like, I'm so like, what do you think of all this? If I were the
interviewer, I would be so annoyed. I was like, first of all, I have to interview Jake Paul. Fucking trash. But then again, he works for the Daily Beast. So I guess, like, he kind of is used to interviewing, like, influencers and stuff.
Totally.
I think Jake Paul is wild. I think the Pauls, Logan and Jake Paul, suck. They both, and I, like you, I also do really get them mixed up, but it is super ignorant and just inconsiderate and just shows his privilege. Totally. And again, I think I mentioned this the other week when we talked about Charlie D'Amelio. Got her name right. I practiced.
Yes.
It's just really frustrating to see all these YouTubers and influencers and TikTokers, whatever, just kind of like being really ignorant or just being super like privileged and just like not being aware of their actions and how much influence they actually have. For Jake Paul to go on and say that 98% of news is fake and that COVID is a hoax is extremely irresponsible when all the facts literally show that this is not a hoax. And it's also just kind of like, it takes away credit from credible news sources when you say 98% of news is fake. And I think it also comes back down to the idea of like, just because you don't believe something means it's fake. And that's not true. I think that's like such a big thing right now where people just refuse to believe reality or just have a different opinion. And so then they just say, oh, you're wrong, that's fake. And that's not. It's just, that's called a difference of opinion. And I think, and it just sucks that so many people listen and follow Jake Paul and Logan Paul and they think their word is the Bible or like their word is true. And that's how we get annoying, ignorant kids who become Jake Paul 2.0.
Definitely. And I will say, like, I don't follow Logan Paul, so I don't know everything he's doing, but I have seen clips of him recently, where he talked about the importance of being allies while all the Black Lives Matter protests were really at its height this year. And he also talked about recently when Harry Styles was in his Vogue cover wearing a dress and wearing a skirt, and Candace Owens was like, basically saying like toxic or saying masculine, that's not masculine and stuff like that. Logan Paul actually did like a whole segment on, he has like a show or something.
Yeah, he has a podcast.
Yeah, and he was talking about toxic masculinity, and I was like, oh, Logan Paul's actually like, based on those two examples, and again, I don't know what else he's doing. Honestly, I do not have any interest in following the Paul brothers unless it's like heavily talked about like this, but I'm just like, he's actually kind of doing some good things. Like, if he has this huge reach with his show, like, he's touching on topics and he's touching on them in a way that's important and that I think is actually a good influence. So I'm like, you know, like, Logan Paul was the horrible one that he took the video of the dead body in Japan. But I mean, can people grow from it? Maybe. Jake Paul obviously has not grown from anything, but maybe Logan Paul could be growing from it. I hope.
I think, to your point, I think he is. I mean, I don't really follow them so much like you. I just really don't. I'm kind of annoyed. But to your point, I do think Logan has been trying to improve. And I do think everybody grows, and like, they're really young still. They're like our age. They're like 25. 26 maybe, so like we're 24, but they're still like young enough to change. And I think the difference is that, like, I think Jake Paul right now has been getting so much hype, and it's just like, loves how people are like, he does things to grab attention, and it's like the shock factor. And I don't think he's over it. Like, he got married to Tana for money. Like, it's just, he's all about that shock factor. And I think Logan Paul's kind of grown from it, or is starting to grow from it, and hopefully Jake learns to get his shit together, because it's just like such a bad influence. It's a bad look. I mean, also, like, from a brand point of view, like, not a lot of brands want to work with people that are so crazy. So it's I mean, but thankfully at least one of the brothers is getting it together.
Definitely. Hopefully. We can only hope that they will get better.